Welcome, ranchers. Today, there's that teacher vibe in me, and that I have some actual show and tells to share with you with my little session today. I'm entitling it Trees Shedding Their Bark, and how we need to be a little bit more like a tree. I'm going to put this up. I'm hoping that, let's see if I can get this really well done. It's a carving of trees. We know that trees grow up through their branches, and they grow down into the earth with their roots. And they also grow wider and wider. You can see here's a little small younger tree, and over on this end we have a more mature tree. So they do get wider and wider each passing year. But have you ever thought about the fact, and this is a piece of bark that I picked up because not only is it a really cool piece of bark, but it also, I don't know, I see figures in things, and I won't even tell you what I see in there because maybe you'll see something that's uniquely yours. But they also, I'll get a little closer here so you can really see that texture on the bark. They also shed their bark. Normally, bark is there to protect them, but now it's no longer able to hang on, because if they want to grow, this bark would contain them and they wouldn't be able to grow. They wouldn't be able to have more growth rings, and so they have to shed this bark in order to grow. So they're shedding their protection. And in the same way, in our lives, we create boundaries and we develop defenses to protect ourselves on the outside as well as ourselves in. And at a certain point, as we mature through the years, we outgrow them. And if we don't allow ourselves to shed our protective layer, we can't expand to our full potential. And mindful living really helps us to look at what is our full potential and how do we want to live? And does that maybe require us to get rid of some habits? Does that require us to grow and shed some bark? Trees need this. They need this protective bark in order to enable them the delicate process of growth and renewal to unfold without threats. You know, if you think about it, when they lose this tough outer coating, their barky surface, they're more vulnerable to attack from things like beetles and beavers, just to name a few. Those pests can devour and can get into, especially if it's a young tree that's shedding its bark. But in order to grow, they still have to shed that bark, that protective layer, and be vulnerable to these outside attacks. Likewise, we need our boundaries and defenses so that the more vulnerable, there we go, the vulnerable parts of ourselves, well, they can be safe and they can heal when needed and unfold. But our growth also, I would say, depends upon our ability to soften, loosen a little bit, and shed some of these boundaries and defenses that we quite honestly, folks, no longer need. It's often the case in life that structures we put in place to help us grow, well, they eventually can become constricting. So unlike a tree, we must consciously decide when it's time to shed our bark. We're not on although we do shed our skin cells and things, and that's always amazing to me how many bazillion of those we shed on a daily or weekly basis. But we don't, have a time when, and I'll just put my little bark here, where we shed our bark on a regular seasonal or a regular growth cycle. But we do have to expand our boundaries, so to speak, and shed some of these old things if we want to move to our next ring of growth, if we want to still use the comparison to the growth rings of a tree. You see, each time that we shed a layer of defensiveness or ease up on a boundary that we no longer need, well, metaphorically, we become bigger people. So, with this in mind, it's important that we take time occasionally, and that's where mindfulness comes in, to reflect or to question our boundaries and defenses. While it's essential to set and honor the protective barriers that we do have in place, I don't want to say that, we need to shed everything because everything's bad. No. But it's equally important that we soften and release at times when the time comes. And in doing so, we can create space for our next phase of growth. I can just share with you that, and I have in the past, of what a type A, worry wart, gotta plan, gotta be in control. Those were defenses for me. Those were things that helped me maneuver through life. And when I became more mindfully aware that I was using these things, not necessarily to grow, but really to just kind of control things. And that's what I've always done. And so that's how it felt. When I decided that some of those old tapes, I keep saying tapes because I think of cassettes and, tapes from my era, but those old MP3s that are up in my mind, when I decided I wanted to shed some of those, it wasn't easy. And it still isn't easy. And it's not like they're completely gone all the time. But I'm aware that I'm working on some of those habits, and I'm aware that I'm outgrowing them. I don't need some of those things to protect me or to protect my emotions from when I was hurt as a child, for example, in my home. So this week, with mindfulness in mind, I want you to pause and think on this thought. Like a tree, I just love this carving. It was done by a local North Dakotan. Like a tree, our growth depends upon our ability to soften, to loosen, and to shed some of those defenses that we no longer need. So think about that. And until next week, don't forget to wash your hands often and be well.